So we've been spending the last 4 weeks in this series called Lost. And basically the reality, of course, is that in life, a lot of times we recognize that there may be a call on our lives, but how often we just, I don't know where I am, I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know how to get there. It's kind of like this, the reality of life. And yet at the same time, we talked about, well, I don't know where I am. Well, yes, in some ways, it's a simple answer, but not overly simplistic, I think, is you're here. You're wherever you are. And we have to find our way to get where. And that's the next question. How do we get there is the next question. So where are we going? We realize, of course, that we have a destination. This is the part about being lost is you have a destination. In fact, I would say that you can't be lost if you don't believe there's a destination. And there are some people who say, it's not about the destination, it's only about the journey. Where I would say it's about both. I'd say it is about the journey. It is about who we become in the course of that journey. But also we have a destination. So let's go back to this. Again, you can't be lost if you don't believe you have a destination. But we know that we often feel lost, and one of the things that indicates to us, it indicates that at some level we know there's somewhere we're supposed to go. At some level we know that there is a destination. The problem can be, what if you don't know the destination? What if you don't know that call? What if you don't know the call God has on your life? And that's the question that arises for so many people. Like, what is God's call in my life? What is God's plan for my life? What is God calling me to? In fact, as Catholics, we know we have the word call we use a lot of times. We like to make things in Latin. And so the word call in Latin is the word vocare, where we get vocation. And so that's the big question. I was like, okay, what is God's call? What's the destination? What's God's call in my life? What's my vocation? And so I just want to kind of do this little recap. So you might know this already, but there are 3 senses of call. There are 3 senses of vocation. The first is the universal call to holiness. The church talks about this and says basically that every person who has ever been made has a destiny. Now, destiny is not the same thing as fate. Fate is you have no choice. Destiny simply means you have a destination. That every human being God has ever made has one destiny, and that destiny is life with Him forever. Is to have a relationship with Him on this earth and life with Him in eternity. That's what God wants for everyone. So regardless of whether someone's an atheist, regardless of what religion they belong to, whether they're Christian or not, that's the destiny that God wants for everyone. Even if we make a shipwreck of our lives, that will never change. Even if you're in the worst spot of your life, that's still His call for you. That is still His destiny for you. We can say no to it, but that will never change. That's the first sense of call, the first sense of vocation. The second sense is what we kind of like as Catholics typically think of when we think of vocation. It's like the big 4, right? There's marriage and family, priesthood, religious life, and then consecrated single life. Those are the kind of the thing we think of, like, I need to find my vocation. That's typically what we think of. And that'll change maybe once or twice in a person's life. The third sense of call is it changes all the time. The third sense of call is, what is God calling me to today? Like, what season is God calling me into? And that changes all of the time. And so we just realize this. So we have 3 senses of call: the universal call to holiness, that God's destiny for you is to be a saint, to live with Him in this life and then live with Him forever in the next. That second sense of call and the third sense of call always changes. Now, the interesting thing, I think, is sometimes when people try to discern that second sense of call, one of the things they're discerning is like, what are the things I like? And that's not a bad thing, because God works with our desires and whatnot. But sometimes we can reduce that second sense of call to what are the tasks that a person will do. So years ago, I had marriage prep with this couple. And at one point, I think it was very shortly before the wedding, maybe 2 weeks. I think it was that close before the wedding. The bride wanted to meet with me. And so privately, I said, great, let's do that. And so we met, and she said, I had kind of a problem. I said, what's the problem? She said, I don't know if I'm supposed to be a nun. And I was like, yeah, you're right. That is a problem. That you're getting married in 2 weeks, so you're not sure if you're called to be a nun. And I said, well, I didn't panic. I said, well, why? Why do you think that you might be called to be a nun? And she said, because ever since I was a kid, I've always desired to live a life of simplicity, like, religious sisters do. I've desired to live a life of poverty. I've desired to live a life that I serve people that no one else serves. I take care of people that no one else is taking care of. I said, okay, that's good. We talked a little bit more. And in that, I kind of was able to point out and said, well, all 3 of those things are things that I know a lot of families who live in poverty. Like, I know a lot of families who choose to live simply. I know a lot of parents who, when they're caring for their kids, they're caring for people who no one else will care for. They are clothing the naked. They are feeding the hungry. They are taking care of the sick. And so all those tasks that you have, that you're drawn to, like, you can live out those tasks in virtually any vocation. The thing we have to discern in that second sense of vocation, the thing we're discerning is not just the tasks. The thing we're discerning is not just the lifestyle. The thing we're discerning is what is the primary relationship by which God will make me into that first person, right? That saint. What's the primary relationship by which God will make me into that person? I mean, this is the gospel today. You know, the two great commandments aren't follow these tasks or live this particular lifestyle. The two great commandments are love, right? That's the relationship. The two great commandments are all about relationship. So to have God at the center of your life, that's the primary relationship. And then beyond that, what is the primary relationship of, okay, love your neighbor as yourself? The two great commandments all boil down to love. Therefore, the primary relationship in your life is where you will learn to love, which means the primary relationship in your life is the relationship through which you will become that person God is calling you to be. So if the destiny, where am I going? If that destiny is that person is being a saint, how do I get there? Well, the way is love. Love is the way. That's it. That's just, how do you get there? Love is the way. It's one of the reasons why St. John Paul II, he called marriage and family, he called it the school of love, because hopefully marriage and family is the first place we learn love, being loved by our family, and hopefully it's the first opportunity we had to actually give the gift of love. And I know so many people who long for that. They want marriage, they want family, and they're even called to this, and that's awesome, that's great, that's the primary relationship. But one of the things we need to undo is we need to undo in some ways what the culture says marriage and family are. Because I think a lot of us think that, I don't know, marriage is like a self-fulfillment project where this person completes me, where this person like solves all my problems, where this person heals me, where this person is like the answer to my heart's deepest longing. That's not the case. In fact, I will always say this, and I don't mean this in an offensive way. I just mean it in a reality way, is I will often say that marriage is where bad people go to die. Meaning that's where they go to die to themselves, to actually learn how to love. In fact, I was talking with this man and his wife. They are a mentor couple for a bunch of couples. And they said he and his wife, when they talk with young couples, they talk about the 3 letters of marriage. And the first letter of marriage is a capital A. When he says, well, typically you have a husband and wife that come together and they think that, okay, we'll meet each other like this, like a capital A. And when we come together, they will solve my problems. When I come together, they will make me happy. When I come together, that they will fulfill me. And what they realize shortly after they get married is this other person can't solve my problems. This other person doesn't fulfill me. This other person isn't enough for the hole in my heart. And so what they'll typically do is the next letter in marriage, and the next letter in marriage is a capital V, where they'll say, okay, now I'm going to split from this person. I'm going to grow from this person. I'm going to find I'm going to look for some other thing or some other person. Because maybe it will be the thing that heals me. Maybe it will be the thing that satisfies me. And this is something that, again, I'll often share, is especially when I'm talking to couples who've been married for a while, and they're having a rough time, and that can be a real thing. Everyone has a rough time, and many married couples can have a rough time. Where they'll say something like, they're not the same person I married. Like they've changed. Like we've grown apart. And I get it, that's real. That is what happens. In fact, that's what you expect to happen. We don't get to choose whether or not we change. We don't get to choose whether or not we grow. But couples can choose. They can choose whether or not they grow apart or whether or not they grow together. And that's the 3rd letter of marriage. There's not an A, you don't fulfill me, and I want to split apart from you on the V. And they said the 3rd letter of marriage is capital H, where the couple's united with each other, but they're both pursuing the Lord. That they're united with each other. I know you can't fulfill me, you can't solve me, you can't fix me, you can't heal me, but we're united in this journey toward the Lord. This is the whole thing. It's not self-fulfillment, it's self-offering. It's not where I get what I want, it's where I give what you need. That's what love is. It's not where I get what I want, it's where I give what you need. And oftentimes we know this, we know like the tragedy of this. We know that oftentimes when people get married, it's not the life they imagined. It's the life they've been given. And this is, again, just get back to this for a second. This is the call to love, right? Because how do we get there? Love is the way. And that way of love is often not the way we imagine. It's often not the life we've imagined. It's the life we're given. I know years ago there was a couple that I had encountered with, and They were, young couple. They were fit. They were athletic. In fact, they were so athletic. They did all these races. They did a bunch of running races. They did triathlons all over the place, and like, again, really fit, really healthy. That's one of the things that bonded them together, was the fact that they loved racing together. They loved training together. And so as they fell in love, they got engaged, and they dreamt of the time after they got married, where it's like, this is gonna be great. Like, we're gonna live in such a way we get to get up early and go for long runs together. We get to go to races together and like stay in the same hotel room, save some money that way. Like, they dreamt of this life where the thing that brought them together, which was their athletics and that kind of thing, was how they got to live. And they got married. Shortly after, I think it was like 2 weeks after they got married, they got in a car accident, and the wife was paralyzed from the neck down. And the life that they imagined was over. But the life that they were given had just started. And it's incredible. It's amazing. But this man and this woman, both of them very, very good, rooted in the Lord. And they had said, 2 weeks earlier, they had said, in health and in sickness. And sickness came quick. And now I think it's been 30, 35 years maybe since they were married. And every day of their marriage, this husband has cared for his wife and has loved her. And for her part, the wife has, sometimes it's easier to give the love than it is to receive the love. It's to give the care than to receive the care. But every day of her life, this wife has received his love and let him love her. And she has loved him in return. Because oftentimes, again, we don't get the life we've imagined. We just get to live the life we're given. So you imagine in that situation, you say, like, how do I do this? Like, how do you get to the destination? Love is the way. It's always the way. This is the primary relationship by which God will shape our hearts into hearts like His. The same thing is true. I remember there was a Bishop Dennis Schnurr. He's my ordaining bishop. He ordained me a deacon. He ordained me a priest. He was a priest of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So, as a kid, he discerned priesthood, and in Iowa, he was ordained, and he worked in a small parish in a small town for 2 years. And after 2 years of being a small town priest, which he imagined that would be his whole life. He imagined, like, I'm going to stay in Cedar Rapids Diocese. I'm going to be in these small towns. Hopefully, I'll be a good priest. After 2 years of this, the USCCB, right, the United States Council of Catholic Bishops, contacted him and invited him to D.C. to be their secretary. So for the next 25 years, so he was ordained a priest, got to live as a priest in the diocese in a parish for 2 years. Then for the next 25 years, he spent his life as a secretary living in Washington, D.C. And I never asked him about this, but I always wanted to. I always wanted to ask him, like, Bishop, as you were a secretary for 25 years, did you ever think, like, what the heck? This is ridiculous. I was not ordained to be a secretary. I was ordained to be a priest in a parish and, like, to be able to love these people in Iowa, because they need love. But that sense of, like, but that's what I was called to. And now, Lord, you just brought me to this place. But then what happened was he was faithful for those 2 years in Cedar Rapids. He was faithful for those 25 years in D.C. And then in, 2002, I think it was, Pope John Paul II called him up and said that he would like him to be the next bishop of the Diocese of Duluth. And this man who had said yes to the priesthood became my spiritual father. After a number of years being here and serving us and doing incredible things in our diocese, he was then asked to become the Archbishop of Cincinnati. That's where he is now. See, the seasons changed, right? The things that he was called to do changed, but that primary relationship of, as a priest, being the bride, Christ the bridegroom, to his bride, the church, wherever the church was, that primary relationship remained the same. His call, whether he was in Cedar Rapids, whether he was Washington, D.C., whether he was here in Duluth or in Cincinnati, his call was the same, and that call was to love. The direction was the same. Love is the way. And that's every one of us. Even if you're not married, even if you're not a sister or brother or religious or priest, anything, we realize that even if that's not your goal, even if you don't know your vocation, you're not lost, because you're love, called to be love. Back in the 1930s, there was a young man living in Poland, and his father was a tailor, and his father wanted him, his name was Jan, he wanted Jan to be an accountant, because, he was a tailor, he was a craftsman, had a good life that way. But he wanted Jan to be an accountant because he saw that as a step up in the world. And so he was a smart guy. Jan studied to be an accountant, became an accountant because his dad wanted him to. But when he started his practice, he had a lot of health problems. And some people who know his story, they think that he had health problems because the stress of that work was just too much for him. And this is sometimes us, right? Sometimes like the life we thought we're going to do, the task we thought we were called to, it just doesn't work out. Maybe it's because we don't have kind of the brains for that, the mind for that. Maybe it's because we don't have the heart for it, the stomach for it. For Jan, he had the brains for it, but he wasn't able to actually live this life. He had so many physical limitations in this area. And in fact, his whole life was in some ways marked by these limitations. Jan, at one point, so he left the accountancy and being an accountant, and he became an apprentice to his dad, became a tailor. And that was fine. But then his mom was incredibly sick, and so Jan, even if he wanted to, I don't think he was able to get married. Kind of that's sometimes the circumstances of life are like this, where it's like I want to, but just didn't have the opportunity. For Jan, one of the reasons why was because he had to care for his mom. He had to love her. Another reason is I believe that at some point he discerned that God was calling him to the single life. He was calling him to be a single man in this world. So he put his heart into that. Now that didn't mean he was dedicated to being a bachelor. That's completely different. But being called to the single life meant, okay, I'm single in this world. That means I love whoever's in front of me. And in 1939, as you know, what's happening in Poland, the Nazis came in and rounded up all the priests. Before they had done this, the priests saw Jan. They saw this man who was an introvert. He was quiet. He kept to himself, just took care of his family, took care of the tailor shop. And they saw this spirituality in him. And they said, Jan, we need you. They saw the writing on the wall. They said, we're going to be taken out. We need you to lead the young men in our parish. And he didn't want to, but he knew he was being called to do it. And so he said yes, and he started these things called living rosary groups, where he'd have groups of 15 young men, a bunch of these different groups of 15 young men. He just taught them how to say yes to the Lord. He taught them how to follow Christ. And he did this because he was asked to, and he loved them because he was asked to. And that's the key, right? If I'm lost, the answer is love. Well, then the question goes back to okay, love who? Well, Jesus told us. Love God with everything. And then basically, maybe you have a primary relationship, but maybe it's just love whoever's in front of you. In Exodus 22, what does the Lord God say? Okay, so you're going to encounter the alien, like the immigrant. You're going to encounter the orphan. You're going to encounter the widow. When you encounter these people, love them. That's God's word for us, right? I might not have a primary relationship. I might not know who that person is. Okay, first is love God, put him at the center. And then secondly, love whoever's in front of you. And this is what Jan did. He has a single man in this world. The priest put him in front of these young men and he said, okay, because I love these men. It's remarkable because every one of these young men, well, many of them went on and died in World War II. Many of these young men went on and married and had families. And the love that they learned from Jan, they brought to their wives and brought to their kids. 10 of these young men became priests. And they brought that love that Jan had taught them into their world. One of those 10 priests was a young man named Father Karol Wojtyła, who became Pope John Paul II. And Pope John Paul II, years after Jan Czarnowski had died, he said, I would not have become a priest if it were not for Jan Czarnowski. This man who just made himself available, this man who just did exactly what Jesus asked. In this world saying, I will love God first. He spent a lot of time in prayer. He spent 4 hours a day in prayer. I'll love God first, but then I will love whoever's in front of me. Why? Because love is the way. His call was love. Archbishop Schnurr's call is love. That husband and wife, their call is love. And love is the way. And this is the last thing. To not leave anyone out. I mentioned married people and single people. I mentioned Archbishop Schnurr, the priests, religious sisters. You know, there's a saint that some people love and some people just resent a little bit. Her name is Saint Therese of Lisieux. And I don't know why people resent Saint Therese. Because Saint Therese taught me a lot. Saint Therese was called to be a bride to Jesus the bridegroom. That was her primary relationship. She's called to be a sister amongst all these other sisters. That's her primary relationship in this context of religious life. But at one point, she was dissatisfied. And that's why I think that more people should really like St. Therese, because a lot of us are dissatisfied, right? A lot of us are like, okay, this is my call, but like, it's lame. I want more. And I think for those of us who are dissatisfied, like, oh yes, here's my call, whether that's single life or priesthood or consecration, whatever the thing is. We want more. And here's what St. Therese says. She said, okay, to be your spouse, Jesus, great. To be a Carmelite, yes. My union with you, to be the mother of souls, it should content me, but it doesn't. Like, okay, keep going. And she says, here's what I want. This is a woman who's in her vocation. And she knows what it means. She knows that it's a lot. To be your spouse of Jesus, to be a Carmelite, be union with, to be mother of souls, all those things are great. It should content me, but it's not. She goes on to say, she says, yet I feel in myself other vocations. She said, I feel myself called to be a soldier, to be a priest, to be an apostle, to be a doctor of the church, to be a martyr. And she said, finally, I feel the need to perform all the most heroic deeds for you, Jesus. I feel in my soul the courage of a crusader, of a soldier for the church, and I wish to die on the field of battle in defense of the church. She meditates on being a martyr, and she's like, I want that. I want people to write about all the great things that I've done, all the things I want to accomplish for you. But then she said, so I went to the Bible. And she's like, I went to the Bible to read your word, give me some direction in this. And she read the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians, chapter 13 and 14. And she realized, she said, okay, first I read that Paul says, not everyone can be an apostle, not everyone can be a prophet or a doctor, etc. That the church is composed of different members. So I get it. I can't be all of those things. But she said, I was still dissatisfied. If this is you, once again, if you're still dissatisfied, that's fine. You're in the place of this future doctor of the church here, current doctor of the church, St. Therese. She goes on to read in 1 Corinthians that St. Paul says that while there are all these gifts, and there is faith and there's hope, that love is the most excellent way that leads to God. And she said, when I read those words, at last I found rest. She said, because that's it. She said, I understood finally that love alone makes its members act. That if this love were to be extinguished, the apostles would no longer preach the gospel, the martyrs would refuse to shed their blood. I understood that love embraces all vocations, that love is all things, that embraces all times and all places. In a word, love is eternal. She said, to be love in the heart of the church, that's my vocation. Oh, my Jesus, my love, at last I have found my vocation. My vocation is love. And so, God, you've given me this place. In the heart of your church, I will be love. I will be love. This is the truth for all of us. If you're dissatisfied with the call God has in your life, hear the words of Therese. You're called to be love. You don't have to wait. Love is the way. You're not lost. You are called to be love. So it's just taking the next step. Love God. Love whoever is there. Just love the person in front of you for Jesus' sake. And then you realize that you are not lost. You realize that you are love. You realize that you have love. And you realize that love is the way home.